All right, so I think it's probably a good enough time to get started. So first of all, thanks everyone for making time for this webinar today. So I'm sure you probably deduced what we'll be talking about from the promotion material that we sent out. Today's webinar is about the combination of Rollbar and Datadog, how these services complement each other, and how you can improve your observability suite by using both of these tools. Just a couple of logistics items here. We do have a large number of attendees for today's session. So with that in mind, we'll have to field all questions through the chat or the Q&A system. So if you do have questions as those come up, feel free to add those to either of those systems there, and we can take a look. We'll have some time for questions at the end as well. All right, and a quick introduction of myself. My name is David Waller. I work as a solutions engineer at Rollbar. So it's my job to ensure that folks are getting the most out of their Rollbar service, that their account is maximized for best practices and optimal usage. And with that, since we are presenting this on Rollbar's behalf, that will be our focus today. Datadog, I think, is a pretty well-known service, so there's probably not a lot of introduction that needs to be done there. The agenda, just very quickly, we will talk about these services and what they do in tandem. Then we'll have a brief feature review of what Rollbar provides that does complement the Datadog ecosystem. And then we'll tinker around with a little bit of demo exercise at the end. All right, so first of all, it probably does help just to state the facts here on what we're talking about. So Datadog, I think, is a pretty ubiquitous tool at this point. I would imagine most folks registered for this because of the fact that Datadog was in the title and less because of Rollbar. So they do have an expansive observability platform. They reach into a lot of different areas of monitoring, observing, troubleshooting as it relates to your infrastructure, applications, the services there. So what is Rollbar? This may be something that's a little less clear to folks. Rollbar is a tool to help you build code quickly and painlessly. And we do this through our foundational product feature, which is the real-time error monitoring and reporting. So Rollbar is something that lives inside of your code and reports those exceptions and errors from your running code back to the Rollbar platform, and that's where we perform some of our analysis and grouping on that. So traditional observability tends to be more of an outside-in focus, as we'll see on this slide. We're often observing what tends to be a bit of a black box, and because we have not put in our observability methods up front, it may be more difficult to debug what's going on there. So that's where traditional observability is a bit lacking. You can find what you need from your logs and metrics, but there may be a large amount of investigation involved. You may be sifting through logs, you may be trying to correlate different events. Whereas with Rollbar, our primary focus is on those errors and what caused them and how they made it into your code. So if anyone here has ever tried to debug a particularly nasty exception or some sort of cascading failure, it's probably clear that spending a lot of time in your observability products, it's not really a useful thing. You have to do it to get more information so that you can fix the problem, but it's typically a slow process to gather that. So that's where Rollbar steps in to dramatically reduce the amount of investigation that you will have to do. Rollbar, since it lives in your code and reports those errors out in real time, it's the first line of defense. It can be your first point of awareness for those code problems. The errors, they get reported, that would be theoretically before any of the support tickets that arise from those errors begin to stream in. That is one of the ways that folks are discovering errors these days, is by having folks write in to tell them that their application is not working. with Rollbar and some of the features that we'll see, things like people tracking, you can start to make those correlations before anyone has even reached out to you. Then we'll also see how from Rollbar, you can move into your observability tools. Datadog is the one that we'll look at today. So quickly pivoting from Rollbar, where you're doing your error investigation and moving over into the logs, the APMs, to continue your investigation without losing any context there. And then we have the ability to send notifications from Rollbar directly to Datadog, the Datadog events stream. That can be a place where you may want to centralize all of your observability. And so instead of spending a lot of time in Rollbar, you do also have the option to just send the Rollbar data to Datadog and view it there. All right, so talking about some of these features, clearly reporting back errors, solving them faster, fixing them, that provides better code health. But how do we apply this to the real world situations that we deal with? So first of all, DevOps monitoring and troubleshooting, you can also think of this as production monitoring. So those errors that do happen in production, those are always going to be your highest priorities. So having a lot of information about those, triggering notifications so that folks are made aware of these things as soon as they arise, helping to shorten the mean time to awareness and resolution there as well. And the service links, just touching on that again, we'll see in the demo how that helps preserve some of the context we get from Rollbar and move that over into the next system. Something that I've seen more of from the customer-facing standpoint lately has been the release monitoring use case, where Rollbar's version and deploy tracking features allow folks to quickly know about any new problems that are introduced by a deploy. So it's been told to us from some of our power users that just watching the Rollbar version screen and the item screen when going through one of those releases or deploys, that's one of the most valuable things that some operations people have been able to do with this product. So getting that information quickly, applying it, making sure that your releases are not causing new problems. And then centralized dashboarding, again, that's back to sending Rollbar events over to Datadog. So centralizing your monitoring capabilities there. We're one of many tools that may exist in a given observability suite. Datadog makes it simple because they provide everything under one roof, but with Rollbar coming into that picture, we do want it to play well there. So integrating with them is important to us as well. The benefits here, the number one thing is the MTTA, MTTR, but that also translates to what's listed at the bottom, which is happier customers, a better user experience. And it does that by providing, I guess, two of the middle bullet points here, the better holistic view of your distributed systems, looking at all of your microservices, all of the pieces of your infrastructure as a whole, and helping to understand the interdependence there. That's typically a big part of debugging microservice-based applications, is figuring out how these things cascade from one service to another. And then Rollbar does have a unique perspective on observability. We are more developer-friendly, I think, than a lot of other observability tools, in that we allow operations folks, development folks, even support folks can benefit from using Rollbar, because there's a lot of information correlated in there. You can tell who's affected by errors. You can see when they were introduced by given versions and deploys. So all of that building towards a more comprehensive view of your code, helping all of the people that work and contribute to that software product, helping them be more informed. Okay, so a quick feature review. We only have a few slides left. I'll make these quick so we can get into our demo time. So these are just some of the features that are particularly helpful for Datadog. Of course, all the things that we contribute to the Rollbar platform, helping you better understand your code, which is going to translate into a better experience. So our primary product, the sort of the bread and butter feature in Rollbar is going to be that error reporting and the grouping on top of that reporting. So most systems are going to get you your logs and metrics in a reasonable amount of time. But where Rollbar takes that a step further is that we're going to group the different errors that you receive by root cause. You can see a little taste of that here on this illustration. We'll look at this in the application as well. We have a number of events, but they're all being grouped back to a single code problem. And that's what helps differentiate Rollbar from something like a logging service, is that we don't have to do a lot of advanced parsing to roll up these types of views. It's something that's done automatically. And we gather information about this. Of course, we show things like the trend, and these are going to be separated by environment as well. So we can see all of our prod errors, but we also send these in for lower environments, and you can quickly sort those out of your items list. It's helpful to know that problems occurred in lower environments, but it's not always helpful to see those on your screen, so you can filter those away. Another thing, the service links feature. This is a relatively new feature. I think we've rolled this out for most customers at this point. There may be a few accounts that have not received this, but this is something that you configure at the project level, and it's going to allow you to take the templated fields that exist inside your Rollbar domain. So we'll look at some occurrences. For those that aren't familiar with Rollbar, this may not be super clear right now, but it's a pretty standard format with the double curly braces. We insert just the environment here, and for each item, that tag will be read and the link will generate with the correct value there. So just using environment, it's a pretty simplistic case. We'll look at some other things we can do with service links as well. The Rollbar notifications going out to Datadog, that's triggered by the same processes as the notification rules that we use. So if you're familiar with those, it's the same concept there. Triggers in Rollbar, we have different templates for events that will trigger a Rollbar notification, and you choose how to send that out from Rollbar to another application. So for Datadog, it requires some tagging as well as the token value for permission, of course. And I think this is probably the feature that we'll start with when we move into our demo. It's going to be the deploy and version tracking. This allows you to very easily tell when problems have been introduced, when they were supposed to be fixed, but maybe weren't. You can see that just from this screenshot we have here, we categorize the different types of errors here, and we display those with the versions shown. So given version 1 here, we would see that there are 12 new code problems introduced. So version 1 has some problems, and we need to start working on fixing those, especially if that's going into our production environment. So we'll look at that in the demo to see how this allows us to track those errors more quickly as well. All right, so I guess it's probably time to do just that and move into the demo. So just a quick disclaimer that I cannot show off everything that we have in the Datadog account. In order to use real data, I'm leveraging our Rollbar Datadog account. So there may be a few screens I can't show and just have to allude to those. And I do apologize for that. So yeah, let's just quickly start off looking at the versions menu. So within Rollbar, we have a number of different displays here. I think some of the core menus are moved out over here to the left. The items menu, this is typically what you think of as your working list, sort of the ground zero. But let's start with some release monitoring and say, okay, we pushed a new version. This was introduced 26 minutes ago, definitely the most recent one. And I need to figure out what's going on here. So looking in, I see 2 new code problems, both of those quite easily linked here. So most things in Rollbar provide this bidirectional linking. You can start your investigation at any point and arrive at either the item or track it back to the version or whatever you'd like to see there. So can't find variable return message. There's a few things I can do to investigate here. I'm just going to start here at the top and sort of make my way down the page. So this is where the service links are going to be populated here. I can click into this menu and show that we do have some of these examples. You know, it's using these templated fields. And what I'm looking at here is that Datadog monitors. This is the same one that we had in that screenshot on the slide. But this is pretty basic, and what it renders from that service link, it's just going to supply the production environment there. And so you can think about all of the other fields that are available within Rollbar, all of the data that we do report here, and being able to supply that over to Datadog. If we don't use logs in our Datadog account, and I don't think I'd be able to show those anyway, but if you needed to inject certain values into a log query or into your APM parameters, you'd have things available for that. You could use the context field as a part of that service link. Here you can see that I've supplied in some goofy data just to show that we allow custom data to be leveraged. And all of this would also be available for use in those service links. So we can look at something like the RQL query here. I think this is probably a better representation of how these provide value, where we add things like the exception message and we filter by the timestamp of that message. So clicking on the service link for that, it's going to quickly move me over into RQL, and we can see these values have been supplied. It's funny, it always opens me up. I think I need to change my service link. It points me to the wrong project there. It always looks like it's not going to show me any data. So pointing it back at JS demo, we should see some of that in a moment. While I'm waiting on that to render, so I had sort of formulated a hypothetical workflow here that I'm trying to solve some problem that I've made up in my head. So this return message. Okay, I look at the monitors, nothing's been triggered recently, 46 weeks ago, probably should just clean this up, but definitely not an APM issue. We don't see anything correlated here back to that code problem. So from there, I think I have this open on 2 tabs. There's a few other things I would probably want to do. Thanks to my source control integration, I get this wonderful code context here that's going to show me the ±5 lines of code around the stack traces. These code coordinates that we get by default have now been enhanced with the actual code that comes from my Git repo. So the Git blame will show me the name of, or the commit message there. It's going to tell me who changed this and when. So that was me, of course. And I can link back over to the source code. In this specific example, I'll tell you what's going on. There is no return message method. We're not really focused too much on the code problem here. If I were making changes, of course, just add in a new method there would probably solve my problem. But looking beyond that, the other things that are going to be helpful for you in investigating these, who's been affected? You can see the people tracking data here. And this is another place where we can link back over to that menu as well. We can navigate from here into the people tracking. I can see a full user story for this person and what they've encountered. So we can support just ID values. You can add usernames and emails there. Privacy concerns limit the usage of that. So some folks will just stick to IDs. But even from here, we have links to both the specific occurrence as well as the timestamp, as well as the item. And with all of these on top of the information that we see there, we also have telemetry data that we're receiving. We have a session story. So all of this helping to clarify what's going on as well. All right, so without spending too much time just looking at all the Rollbar features, there's obviously a lot here that I would like to show you, but this is a webinar about what we do together. So moving beyond that, the service links workflow, I think, is a big one. You can see that I also have something linked to APM. I can't click that button. That's one of my security limitations there. I think I can show staging though. So I have the staging environment wired up with these service links as well. And from here, we can just quickly see in the staging environment what's going on with these different services. So quickly navigating there, having the environment tag preserved, just one of the many features or one of the many fields that we can leverage as a part of that integration. All right, so beyond that, the other core workflow that we mentioned, here's my RQL query and the data that it returned. The other way of handling Rollbar and Datadog together, the centralized monitoring. This is the notifications menu for a given service. This is actually from the Rollbar account since it is configured with Datadog. This is how you can take those events from Rollbar and move them over into Datadog for viewing there. Now here for this project, this one's actually disabled, so it's pretty safe for me to tinker around in here. But just like the other notification channels in Rollbar, if you've used those, you're probably familiar with the different templates that we have available. So the one that is currently triggering to Datadog, the one that I can show you from our events, we do have a deploy event that is sending events to our Datadog account. You can see here that I've filtered only the Rollbar events and we can see those coming in. So I would love to unfilter this, but I'm definitely not allowed to do that. So you can imagine these streaming in with the other events that you have, deploys especially with these being filtered in with the other events. You could say there's a deploy, and then we see a number of events that have happened right after that deploy. So we need to investigate. And even within Rollbar, we do have ways of showing that. I think the items menu may have given you a brief glimpse of that. The deploys show up as line items in the full items menu here as well. So if we have CI/CD set up, if we're sending in a lot of deploys, those will separate the items, and that helps us to better understand how these new issues are temporally grouped when they occurred, and that could help to understand why. And of course, the link back to my deploy here. I made a number of commits on my code before actually going to Jenkins to push this through, and we see all of those stacked up here. Okay, so those are, I think, the core workflows. So if I wanted to add more to my Datadog account, new item, that's definitely one of the primary Rollbar triggers. And when I go to configure that, that's where it opens here to show me the different tags and the options that I have available for this. So I think this is sort of the standard that we have for that. The API key, that's what I was not allowed to get to send my own events. And then we have things like the title and the text. So making sure that those are uniform with how you expect to see them in Datadog. If we're just sending you a bunch of unstructured text, if it doesn't match up, it's just going to create more confusion. So formatting that correctly is important as well. And just with all the other notification rules that we have, the ability to filter these is important. So it may be that you need to create multiple notification rules and direct them to different channels. This is something that we definitely recommend when you're setting up Slack rules and things like that. Maybe you send different environments to different endpoints to make sure that they're separate and that you're getting the best experience that you deserve from your notifications there. All right, and so I think that's pretty much it. There's a lot more that I could show you. I do a lot of training for Rollbar, so typically I'm just going to wheel around through these menus and try to show off useful things. That's not really why we're here today. So let's just open it up for any questions that there may be. We have some time for that. So anything that you'd like to know about the existing integration, maybe something that I did not cover, feel free to bring those questions into either Q&A or the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those. Oh, here's a question. A brief overview of the universe of parameters sent from Rollbar to Datadog. So without me working on this integration heavily for my customers, for my account, the formatting that's available here, I think it's mostly about the use of the different fields in Rollbar. So there's a number of different resources available for that as well. Let's just look at the Datadog documentation first. Now it's not my job to just parrot the documentation. So from here, I think it's the notification variables is the part that you're asking about. And it looks like this is tagged as its own separate area of the doc. So let me just paste this into the chat for you right now. But with those variables, it's the same ones that we use in the service links. And that is just any field that you see that exists in your data, you can use in double brackets there. So when I talked about the custom data that was being sent, when I configure my Rollbar agent as a part of this little code snippet, I just add custom key value pairs here. For my little flimsy demo app, it's supposed to mimic a donation page. So I had team donations. And that could be useful to me in a number of ways. I could route my alerts on that. I could send that information as a part of the payload of the alert. I can even use that for custom fingerprinting. If I need to group certain items together based on data fields that Rollbar is not detecting automatically, all of that is available for use there. So make sure to add in the data you need. You don't pay anything extra for this. So send us whatever you think will help. We can always go back and search for it. And we put it all in a huge database table. So if it's in your data, then we should have it available for reference as well. All right, so I'm going to quickly do one from the chat system, then we'll move to the Q&A. So the last question there was about how to integrate with GitHub. We may or may not have a video showing this full process. I don't want to say we do because I think it's my job to record it. But from here, there is a small little process you go through to integrate as far as choosing what service you choose. GitHub, Bitbucket, or GitLab, I think are the three that we currently support. And from there, you have to supply credentials, a repository name, a branch, and then optionally a project root if you're looking in a subfolder of that. So that's how you connect the source control integration. Then there's also a couple of things to do to get the code context. You add the server root value or just the root, depending on what language, and optionally the code version to help pull up the relevant code context there. So when we see this here, this is supplied by the occurrence data pointing to a given set of code coordinates. And then the integration with that handshake that we've supplied, it goes and retrieves this from GitHub. It uses API calls to pull that. And so if you want to know what's available in your occurrence data, you can either try to use RQL as a query language, or each occurrence will show you a full JSON breakdown. This is the exact payload as we receive it. And then we take all of this information and render it into useful views like this. Okay, so moving on, collections of pre-built Datadog service links. We have just one, I think, on our documentation, and we definitely need to add some more. But there are some other services here that you may be able to cherry pick from those as well. So Datadog, it's just APM pointing at a request URL. But here's one, yourloggingtool.com. There may be something you can borrow from this. RQL has useful stuff. Of course, that's just our way to query those. So there's probably room for improvement there. One of the things that I've noticed is that content sharing, I think, would help with RQL. So we'll probably use GitHub in the interim, but hopefully we can get you some more content there. And then question about how much data from Rollbar would typically end up in Datadog. That is up to you as the user to control. In this case, we don't actually supply the every occurrence template. That's one that you can use on Slack or email, but we don't have that as an option here. So you would not be getting a one-to-one copy of all data from Rollbar to Datadog. You could either do new item, which is one event for every grouped item. So you could have millions of an item, but you would just receive the one. But if you did want to know about things like spikes in the occurrence rate of a given item, you have the ability to customize that. 1,000 of these in an hour is too much, but only if we see that it's affected at least 200 different IP addresses. So these filters put in place to help you send the right messages to Rollbar without sending too much. And then, some of the other options, deploy, I think we already saw that, but then 10 to the nth occurrence rate. We want to know about the 10th, the 100th, the 1,000th, etc. Those are big numbers. We care about that logarithmic growth. All right, so I think that takes the majority of the questions. Okay, just got one that came in. Let me read this really quick. RQL useful. Okay, yeah, this is something that I definitely hear a lot. Plans to make RQL more performant, what we can do about that. So a couple of things that I can tell you. First of all, you can bypass a lot of the performance slowdown by using the API version of RQL. I don't fully understand the architecture, but apparently a part of the process that involves getting this data to the RQL menu to rendering it here is a bit of a bottleneck. So if you can create a small little query script that will send a query, poll it, and then retrieve those results, then that could potentially help you. And I actually have a query or a script here that does contain some of that RQL logic. This is Python. It's used for deleting occurrences. So feel free to repurpose this as you need. Another thing I can say about that, we have plans to roll out some new operational metrics dashboards. We'll be doing that within this quarter, hopefully, to get out some high-level operational views displayed in Rollbar, which would hopefully help to mimic what you're doing with RQL. We'd love to hear more about what specific metrics you find useful, the things that are working for you, so that we could potentially productize those and build that into that. But when we see things like this main dashboard, clicking into my project specific view here, where we get some of the top level views, our plan is to further enhance this to add things like NTTR trending, deploy frequency, those types of useful metrics that help you understand my code quality is actually improving like I need for it to. Okay, so that's more about specific error troubleshooting I'm seeing in the chat. So yeah, I'll have to think a bit more about that. But if there is some way that you could potentially jump over to API calls for RQL, then I know that would at least improve the load time of those results. Cool. Okay, so I think that handles most of the questions we've got here. These types of questions, some of these that we're getting here at the end actually fit in well with the one of the other sessions that we do. We have a monthly office hours. So for those that are just looking for a place to ask usage questions to learn more about Rollbar, if you have issues, feature requests, I lead those monthly office hour sessions. You can bring those to me. I can report those back to product. So anything that you'd like to bring to those sessions is fair game, really. So I think our next office hour session will be exactly 2 weeks from today at the same time, and we should have some promotion going out about that as well. Thanks everyone for joining today. If you do have any final questions, you can send them in and we can follow up to answer those via email or something. Otherwise, I hope you found this useful and I hope everyone has a great day.